Says we're live. I like to check in on Facebook. We're going to do quick intros today, and then we're going to get straight to it because we have a full plate, and I'm running about 10 minutes late from doing my podcast with Jeff Styles, which is currently out. There we go. Yep, it looks good. This is Of, By, and For the People, conversations centered around the American experiment and headlines with my co-host. We try to bring new people on from time to time. To be honest, it's hard sometimes to find people who just don't agree with us, which we do sometimes just to get a fresh perspective on some old ideas. But it's hard to find people that will disagree in a civil manner and give some latitude and back and forth. So we get together and we try to, straw man each other's arguments, push back, hold each other accountable for our viewpoints from time to time. It is sponsored by our friends at Eric Buchanan and Associates. Let's bring Eric up. Let him go first, tell you who he is and what he does. 3, 2, 1, the man, the myth. What's up, Eric Buchanan?
Hey, Clint, how are you? Good to see you today.
Good seeing you, buddy.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and why it matters, and then we're going to bring Matthew up, and we're going to rock and roll. We got 4 or 5 good topics.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it matters, but I'll throw it out there anyway.
Does.
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. I'm a disability insurance attorney in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My background is that I went to W&O Law School. Before that, I was in the Navy for 5.5 years, flying P-3 Orion sub-hunting aircraft. Around the end of the Cold War is when I was doing that. Before that, I went to the Virginia Military Institute, where I was a history major. I grew up in Chattanooga, went to Red Bank High School, played rugby with you, played soccer in high school, and I love American history and love studying the Constitution. Very quickly, my commercial, Eric Buchanan and Associates, helps people all over the United States who've been denied long-term disability insurance, private disability insurance, health insurance, long-term care, or life insurance claims. If you have an insurance policy, either a group one through work or a private individual one that you bought on your own, give us a call. If the insurance company is giving you any kind of a runaround, doesn't give the answers that you want, doesn't pay you the money you deserve, we can be found on the World Wide Web at buchanandisability.com. It's BUCHANAN disability.com. Our phone number is 877-634-2506. Give us a shout and see if we can help you with any disability insurance, health insurance, life insurance, or long-term care policy problems anywhere in the United States. If you need any help, we work with local attorneys where we need to in states where we're not licensed, so we can help anywhere in the U.S.
There we go. Matthew Durham. Sorry, I thought you were wrapping it up earlier when I hit him to come on. My bad. Go ahead for it, Matthew. Who are you and what do you do, buddy?
Hey folks, my name is Matthew Durham. I am a research project manager at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, where I oversee a project looking at how people's faith and worldview changes over time. It's been going on for over 20 years at this point, and we compare our results with our sister team in Bielefeld, Germany. I received my master's degree in psychology at the same university, UTC, as well as my undergraduate in philosophy. Before all of that, I worked in cancer research for about 8 years on the regulatory affairs side, 250 different research trials, all different kinds of cancer. And I am also a suburban homesteader.
How's that going real quick? How's the planting, harvesting? What season are you in right now, sir?
We're in the second planting. We're sort of finishing up with the first harvest, planting second harvest stuff for fall. We didn't do any wheats or cereals or anything like that, so we're not having to deal with that portion of the harvest. But it's slowing down a little bit with the tomatoes. But other things that we thought were dying have all of a sudden just sprouted, and they're growing like gangbusters. The crops love the heat as long as we keep it reasonably watered, and the pests have actually started to decrease a little bit. So
I'm glad they like the heat. We're going to talk about global boiling maybe later. And to your point, I didn't know you could grow cereal. If you ever grow like Fruit Loops, I would love a harvest of those because that's my favorite and they're pretty expensive.
Is it true that if you plant the Captain Crunch right into the ground directly out of the box, that it's been genetically modified so it won't grow new Captain Crunch?
Oh, I'm sure that's why it doesn't grow new Captain Crunch.
Yeah. And how do you have to shake the tree to get the frosted flakes out of it? Do you use like an apple shake? This is not serious stuff. Hey, Eric Buchanan, why don't you start us off today? Because we're going to talk about, you're an attorney. I know it's not in your wheelhouse as far as the criminal side of it, but Hunter Biden had a plea deal go south. Tell us exactly what you know about it and why you think that matters, sir.
Yeah, I've been doing a little research into this and trying to get some more details out of this. And I think this matters a whole lot. I before we got started, I compared this to the rock got flipped over and all the little bugs underneath are going scurrying to the corners. This exposed something that I think is very important. So let's start with a couple big picture questions and then we get into the details. Big picture question. Why do we care about this guy's criminal charges? Do we really care if the president's son has been smoking crack? How does that affect the United States? Do we care if he's an addict? Do we care, maybe if he has a gun charge? Well, that's a little hypocritical. What if he's cheating on his taxes? That's maybe a little hypocritical for somebody for the son of the president who says we need to have the rich pay more taxes. Yeah, that's a little bit of political damage. I submit the real problem here, the real concern that people are aware of, is there's more and more evidence, more and more allegations, more and more information to support the idea that President Biden may have been either passively or somehow even willingly going along with his son peddling his father's influence. So when Joe Biden was the vice president, and at other times, was Hunter Biden making money by going around telling foreign countries and big corporations in foreign countries that, hey, I can get you something out of using my dad's influence. I can influence my dad to do something for you. Was that influence peddling going on? The early evidence we had of that from the Hunter Biden laptop was, and by the way, the reason the Hunter Biden laptop is a big deal is the same thing. It's not because Hunter Biden was smoking crack and hanging out with prostitutes. It's because there were emails saying that they were setting aside 10% for the big guy. What was the big guy? Joe Biden. So these questions that are coming out more and more, did Joe Biden actually make policy changes based on money that was sent to his son or to his other family members? Was he influenced by those things? Was Hunter Biden acting as a representative of foreign nations or foreign corporations when he was on the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company? What was his job? What was he supposed to be doing? Was it to get his dad to change policy in the United States more favorably for the Ukrainian energy industry?
Especially for $83,000 a month.
Yeah, these are the big picture questions. It's not Hunter Biden smoking crap, hanging out with prostitutes, and really we don't care that much about his taxes. It's whether there was corruption at the level that affected his dad was involved. That's what we really want to know. So he ends up working out a plea deal with the Department of Justice, and the plea deal is for 2 tax charges. He's failed to pay taxes on large chunks of income. Again, footnote, what is this income for? What is Hunter Biden such an expert in? And why is he getting paid a lot of money? And why is he not paying taxes on a lot of money? Come back to that in a second. But so 2 charges of failing to pay taxes are going to be pled down. So he's going to plead guilty to those, and for that he's basically going to be put on probation. The other charge is the gun charge. And what was the gun charge? Well, he purchased a firearm and he filled out a form when he bought the firearm to basically say, I am not an addict. By his own admission in his biography, admitted that around the same time he bought the gun that he was regularly doing crack cocaine. So sort of easy case for the government to make that he illegally purchased a firearm, that he lied on the application. For the gun charge, they actually were not going to put in a plea deal where he pled guilty and got a fine or got some kind of probation. Instead, the gun charge was going to be put into a formal diversion. So what does that mean? Well, that means there's an agreement put down that if he doesn't do anything else bad for a certain period of time, the government will not bring those charges. That's what a diversion is. So the prosecutors are going to exercise their discretion to say, all right, we're going to agree that we're just going to put this one away in a drawer somewhere and not bring it back out as long as you don't do something else that makes us want to prosecute you. And I'm not sure how long it was for, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Those are kind of typical terms. And after that time, it goes away. If he does something else bad during that time, he can be charged with the gun charge. That was the deal. What ended up happening was there were a couple of amicus briefs, and that's where people not involved in the case but are interested parties that may have similar issues or for public interest got involved. One of them was from Republican congressman. Another one was from a probably a right-leaning think tank, as I understand it. Wrote these amicus briefs to the judge and basically said, "Hey, we haven't seen the plea deal. They haven't made it public yet. When you get it in front of you, look very carefully to see what are the terms of exactly what charges are being agreed to and what amnesty or promises is he being given. And when the judge went through the plea deal, what she found was buried in an unusual place where it would not normally be found in any kind of a plea deal, over in the document that documented the gun diversion agreement. Inside there was the agreement that this overall plea deal altogether would the government would agree not to charge Hunter Biden with any crimes
Down the road. Yeah.
down the road for anything during a certain time period. And that certain time period basically covered all the past several years where these other allegations are going on of corruption at the highest level that our president is actually involved in, that as vice president he may have been getting money or getting at least his son paid money and then exercised that influence, that Hunter Biden may have been acting as an unregistered foreign agent, where it's required that if you can lobby as an American for a foreign company, you can go to Congress and say, hey, I'd like this company from Saudi Arabia to get a good government contract. But if you're going to do that, you have to register as a foreign agent. If if you just go in and tell your dad, hey, Vice President Dad, this Ukrainian energy company would do great things for America, you can't do that unless you've registered as a foreign agent. It's probably also kind of inappropriate to do it behind closed doors. And also, by the way, if you're getting money from the company and you share it with your dad, who happens to be the vice president, that would be really bad. So all of those corruption charges, the things related to the influence peddling, would all go away under this plea deal. Everything would go away under this plea deal. Any other potential charges would go away. So the judge, I think this is where it gets a little interesting. So the judge says to the DOJ, first of all, the DOJ in the court hearing argued first to the judge that she had no discretion, that she had to essentially rubber stamp this. And the judge basically pushed back and said, what are you talking about? No, this is my job to review this to make sure that it follows the law. And then then she started going through it, and she basically said, do you intend, is there language in here that would provide global immunity for any crimes for Mr. Biden during this time period? And they said yes. And she also asked, are you currently investigating him for any other charges? They said yes. And she said, so this agreement would preclude you from prosecuting him for those other charges you're currently investigating? They said yes. Do you intend for that to be the agreement? And at first they said, well, yes. And she said, you mean so it would cover everything, even the stuff you're currently investigating? And they basically came back and said, well, actually, no. And she turned to Hunter Biden and said, if it turned out that this agreement did not release you from all charges, would you agree to it? He said no. So it sounds like we don't have an agreement here. Does this release everybody or not? Or all the charges or not? Hunter Biden's team got pretty upset during the hearing and basically said, wait a minute, we thought this was releasing all charges. When the DOJ was pressed, they said, well, we actually didn't mean for it to be read that way. We didn't mean for it to cover all the charges, even though at first they sort of said that it did and tried to press the judge to approve it the way that it did. So when she pressed them and they admitted it would cover everything the way it was, it could be read to cover everything, but that's not what they meant. That's when things fell apart, when they basically said, that's not what we meant, when they backtracked. Now, why would they at first say this covered everything and then admit openly to the judge eventually that he was not being released from everything and that was not the deal? Because while at the same time this plea deal was going on, they are arguing to Congress that we cannot release documents that might show what our investigation has found in terms of Hunter Biden and what his father knew and when he knew it, because there's a current investigation. So let me break this down and make it a little more clear. They wanted to release all the charges against Hunter Biden for everything, including what they're currently investigating. But they want to be able to tell Congress that they can't turn over information because they're still investigating Hunter Biden. And when the judge pressed them on it, the Department of Justice basically backed down and clarified and said, no, we don't actually intend this to release all of the charges related to what's currently being investigated, which is this for the foreign influence and peddling and corruption charges. Why could they not say we really meant for those to be released? Because then they would have to tell Congress the investigation is over, and they'd have to
Right.
release the documents to Congress.
All right, let's get so let's
So it all
go
fell
ahead. I'm sorry.
apart, and they end up not making the deal. And
Yeah.
what the witnesses who were there in the courtroom, because you can't have TV in there. A lot of people basically said the Hunter Biden's attorneys were basically pretty flabbergasted because they thought we'd had all this worked out, and it was this big deal, and everything was gonna be fine. And it looks like that's what they originally intended until the judge made the Department of Justice admit they didn't mean to release the current corruption charges, but maybe they really did until they were asked about it.
Matthew, want to give your take on all this before I do? Let's get some opinions flowing here.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to know precisely and for certain what's going through their minds, but it does sound like they're walking a tightrope here with a balance bar, stick with weights on either end, and they're trying to balance both of these weights simultaneously, whilst not acknowledging that they're balancing both of these weights publicly. I guess I don't know. It just seems like an impossible position that these lawyers have been put in at the DOJ. I don't know how to balance what they're trying to balance successfully for any kind of long-term solution. Like, Congress is not going to give up on this. The Republicans in Congress are not going to stop. So at some point, either the investigation has to end, in which case they have to make the documents public, presumably, or it doesn't, and Biden doesn't get released from these charges for who knows how long. I don't, or at least until someone else gets into the presidency that might be more inclined to stop the pressure on the DOJ. I don't know.
Hey, Clint, before you go, let me add a couple other quick little points because I want to hear your take, big picture. But Matthew, back to what your question is. The criticism originally was this was just such a sweetheart deal that he committed big tax fraud. There was a lot of taxes he didn't pay, and it was pled down to a misdemeanor, a slap on the wrist. The gun charges was an open and shut case of him having lied on this form because his own biography showed that, and plus the pictures of his laptop showing him doing drugs around the same time that he bought the gun, and yet it was going to be a complete diversion, which basically means it goes away. Is if he doesn't commit another crime during the time period, or more importantly, if he's not charged with another crime during whatever the following 3 or 5 years is, it goes away as if it never happened. So this was already a tremendous sweetheart deal for him. What it turns out, though, that now that people paid attention to what was actually in those documents, it was intended to not just be a sweetheart deal on those charges. It was intended to provide him complete immunity for any crimes that he might have committed during the relevant time period, which included the time period that he may have been influence peddling and that his dad may have been involved in that.
Yeah. So I'll give my take on this via bullet points, unless Matthew, you want to respond to what Eric said. He kind of answered your question a little bit,
Yep.
but so Matthew, I personally don't find it. I don't find it that hard. I think this is I think they slipped it in there thinking it was going to get signed off on. It wasn't going to get looked at. It's a get out of jail free card moving forward. I think then all the Democrats or the people on the extreme side, not all Democrats, would have been able to say, hey, that's been addressed. We've already done this. We don't need to keep investigating this because they were trying to protect the big guy. So I think it's 100%. It got caught, and they weren't expecting it to get caught. And so when the husband walks in on the wife or the wife walks in on the husband, you can get mad if you got caught, but it's your problem. You got caught with your pants down, and I think the attorneys got caught doing a deal with their pants down. I just want to remind people real quick: the IRS whistleblower was told not to ask about stuff in the Hunter Biden laptop. You can't ask about the big guy. You can't ask about family stuff. Joe Biden comes for years said, I don't know anything about my son's dealing. We know that now is lied. We know that Joe Biden did stuff about Ukraine. He did exactly what they said Trump was doing. He withheld money till he got someone fired. The gun charge, though, people don't understand this. Not only did he do that, he threw the gun away in a dumpster across close to a high school. Girlfriend went back to try to pick up the gun. It was gone. The Secret Service went to the gun owner trying to get the documents on it. This has been a cover up since day one. And for Democrats who say they want to be tough on guns, I say start inside your own house. And they're not going to hold him accountable for that. I'm telling you right now, that'll get washed away, I think. And the last thing, it's plausible deniability. This whole thing has been set up to use Hunter as the tip of the spear. And if we can just punish Hunter enough to call off the dogs, then that will actually relieve pressure on the bigger issue is our current president embroiled in bribery schemes over the last decade or more. And so I say this to the Hunter Biden plea deal. I'm glad it fell apart. I think people were surprised it fell apart. And I think either they're going to use Hunter and he is going to agree, like he's been paying half, he said, I've been paying half of the family's bills and my dad's bills in the text to his daughter. I'm saying this, either he is going to give up the ghost and they're going to go after and find all the corruption, or he's going to be the one that he's going to take the hit. He's going to be the one who goes down for all of it and just admit I'm telling you right now, it's either going to be the biggest scandal we've ever had, or he is going to get hammered and he is going to be the fall guy. And I don't know of another middle ground here that it could go down. I was not surprised it fell apart at all. I was amazed that immediately when that plea deal came out, everybody that I know, even on the left side on the CNNs, were like, how is he getting this deal? It is a sweetheart deal, especially in front of everybody. I mean, they're doing it in public. I think it's a ridiculous thing. I don't know why we're even talking about Hunter, to be honest with you. Hunter is just the go-between. I don't know why we're all focused on Hunter unless it's to go get the main people involved. I'm done on this topic. Eric and Matthew, you guys can wrap this one up.
Well, my last point to answer your question, Clint, is put on your Brainiac hat for a second. What's the Latin question we should be asking? Cui bono? Who benefits? Who benefits by sweeping this under the rug? Who benefits because we put these charges to bed? And the answer is the DOJ's boss.
That's right.
The DOJ's boss is the President of the United States. President of the United States, according to what the whistleblowers are saying, according to what Hunter Biden laptop has shown, according to other documents that have come out, according to the investigation, the text message, the multiple corporations that are owned by various Biden family members. And I have yet to hear a single explanation of where that money is coming from. What are they doing to earn the money that's going into those dozens of corporations? All strongly suggest that the only thing of value they have to sell is Joe Biden's influence.
His last name, and they're not going to give it though to the granddaughter that they don't want to acknowledge. They're not going to let her have the last name.
Oh yeah, it's his last name, but it's ultimately his influence with Ukrainian energy companies and Romanian companies and Chinese financial investment companies that are all sent money to these Biden family corporations. For what purpose? For what are they doing to earn that money? And no one wants to ask those questions in the mainstream media. Who benefits from the cover up of putting these charges to sleep?
Biden. I'll say this to you. I need to say something I'm a little disappointed on both of you from, and I don't really call you out much on this podcast. The fact that Eric says, what's the old Italian quote we should be, and both of y'all knew it, kiss my ass. Both of you intellectual, you 1%ers, technocrat folks, whatever word I'm trying to throw out there to sound smart at this point. The fact that two of the three of you both go, oh, and y'all nodded and agree, oh, yes, the blah, blah, blah. Y'all both can suck one on that one. That was terrible for both of y'all to make me feel that dumb.
By the way, it's Latin, not Italian.
Take that with you. Take that. I hand this to
Cui bono. C-U-I.
For our audio listeners, I just gave Eric the American flag wave of the bird on our visual.
You know what the good news is, at least you're pretty.
Whatever. I'm smart at Waffle House sometimes. By God. All right. All right. So do you want to, Matthew, you want to go to your topic or do you hit my topic real fast? Which one do you want to do, buddy? I don't care either way. Mine's not going to take long. Let's go into mine because yours is philosophy a little bit. I just was amazed that they found, and I looked this up. So I'm looking here on Yahoo News, and it says that this topic is changing. So I'm just going to go ahead and preface this with, this could be one of those more to the story than we know now. In other words, it may come out that it's a combination of this. It could be misleading. It's been on the headlines for a day or two. Illegal medical lab containing bioengineered mice, infectious agents, including HIV, herpes, discovered in California. And another one says it's a Chinese COVID lab, basically where they were making COVID. Here's what it says. An illegal medical lab was discovered by investigators in a warehouse in Fresno, California. The lab was full of bioengineered mice and samples of diseases like COVID-19, HIV, and herpes. Roughly 1,000 mice were found. Nearly 2 were already dead. The rest were killed. Let's see, the illegal lab.
200 were already dead.
200. I'm sorry, 200 were already dead. Yeah, I'm just reading it right here. Anyway, it's a makeshift lab. Wang Lin, a representative of the company.
Zhao Lin. Is
Yeah,
how you say? Is that how you say that name? Wang Zhao.
I don't know. If you're asking the guy that's pronouncing it wrong, you may be asking the wrong dude. I mean, yeah. Anyway, if you keep going down through here, basically one of the headlines I read was it's a secret Chinese lab in California that's doing things, and it was discovered because they were just doing some. I think you had a code enforcer guy saw some stuff going on, like, hey, that doesn't look right, and they did an inspection and found that, oh, this is basically they're doing stuff with COVID and other agents. I find that terrifyingly surprising, and yet somehow not surprising at all. Anybody got a take on this that they want to jump in, or we're just going to say it and move on?
Can I just add this real quick and before we do our takes on it? So more than just COVID, this is from the Mid-Valley Times in California. Court documents from the CDC found potentially infectious agents that stated that the CDC found potentially infectious agents location. These included both bacterial and viral agents, including chlamydia, E. coli, streptococcus pneumonia, hepatitis B and C, herpes 1 and 5, and rubella. The CDC also found samples of malaria. This was not a biolab doing COVID testing.
No.
Or producing COVID tests. They found 900 genetically engineered mice. 773 had to be euthanized. They found another 7,800 already dead. But those biological agents, can you imagine just for a second if you were the Chinese and you could just open up a shop in somewhere in a free country and start basically injecting mice with these diseases that affect humans, or otherwise recreating these diseases and scattering them around? What could we do in America if we could spread chlamydia, E. coli, streptococcus pneumonia, hepatitis B and C, herpes 1 and 5, rubella, and malaria, as well as COVID, and make sure those diseases were regularly going around? And this is just one little lab in California.
I'm just amazed, to be honest with you, that this is not on the front page somewhere. But
well, just for the record, it's on the front page of the California Globe,
right,
which is the newspaper from Fresno, California, which is near where this town is. So for people who if you picture on a map, east of San Francisco, there's the San Joaquin Valley, kind of east southeast of it, and there's basically the stretch from Sacramento down to Bakersfield. Fresno's about halfway down. Reedley, California is out there in that California Valley in the Central California regions. It's basically small town California,
right.
Small town agricultural California. If you've ever seen the movie American Graffiti, they filmed that movie in those small towns in Central California. That's basically where this is.
Well, and Matthew, you can wrap this one up. Like I said, it can go fast. It's just, this may be more to this. It may be misleading. It may come out that's, I don't know. I just find it odd that if there's any truth to it, it's not on NBC. It's not on CNN. I don't see it on Fox, and it may be in a day or two, but we're a podcast in Chattanooga, Tennessee. How am I not talking about it? And it may be because, I don't have fact checkers and it may come out to be bogus, which down the road I will do a retraction.
The Chinese Communist Party has incredibly strict rules for Americans or many different people from foreign countries owning anything in China. In fact, it took, I think BlackRock might be one of the only countries or companies that has managed to secure actual ownership of Chinese property Everything else is fake. Yeah, look into it. You don't, if you think you own any Chinese stock of any Chinese companies, you don't. You own a fake intermediary proxy. And I'm inclined to think at this point that, they are treating that they correctly recognize the United States as an enemy, because we are, right? It makes no sense for them to allow American values into their country. And frankly, it makes no sense for us to allow the CCP to own property here for precisely the same reasons. They are antithetical. The CCP is antithetical to American values.
And they've stated that. It's the Trojan. It is the definition of Trojan horse, which I have never understood. Once you have aligned yourself against us politically and value wise, I'm okay with being allies in certain things. I'm okay with working together on a goal, but you don't get to own property in our country. That's not how that should work. I don't think. I don't get that at all.
We should not be dependent upon companies owned by our proclaimed enemies.
Yeah.
For our own livelihoods.
Yeah.
Right. We are massively dependent upon China for a wide variety of things, and I think we need to look at other countries that are not our stated enemies, that whose fundamental operating principles are not opposed to the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and all of the values that America has stood for a long time in its most ideal form, right? And we don't. I don't know. I don't have the answers for how all to do that. I know it's complicated, but China does it with U.S. Individuals and companies. So what stops us from doing it with them?
I don't, and Eric, I'll give you the last word. I don't know how. I think sometimes we make it complicated, and people can hate Trump all they want, but I know this: the trade deals he was doing and the things he was putting in place, people can go tear him apart if they want to. But I just think you say no to the things you know are wrong, and you say yes. And if people don't understand it, and you're explaining it, oh, it's not best for the United States. That's my explanation. There you go. I don't think it's good to have CCP owned properties and buildings and companies inside our country that that can fly under the radar and act against our interests. There you go. There you go. I'm running for office, Eric.
So I want to give a shout out to the California Reedley City code enforcer who was walking around the supposedly abandoned warehouses and noticed an ordinary garden hose sticking through a hole in the wall, like someone had drilled a hole through the plaster in this wall in this warehouse in the middle of the warehouse district in this central California town. And that code enforcer had the gumption to go, that doesn't look right. Let me figure out what's going on here. And found this Chinese lab that had E. coli, malaria, COVID, streptococcus, and all these other things, genetically engineered mice, vial after vial of. There's another one. Vials which contain biohazardous materials. Many have having the labels removed, so we don't know what was in them. This just this. If I was the bad guy in one of the in a good old fashioned Hollywood movie, this is what I would have the bad Chinese guys do: is build this lab. And so this code enforcer sees this garden hose sticking out the wall, investigates, and saves America. That's fantastic. We need to take that investigator and move him or her into the Hunter Biden investigation at the Department of Justice.
He'll just become another whistleblower they don't listen to. Hey, and my thing on this is, this makes me wonder immediately, and it's not a quote in Latin, so pardon me if we're not on the same page, but I'm going to give you both the chance to get it right. What's the question we should be asking ourselves now after reading that? Anybody? Or am I the smartest one of the three right now?
Cui protest. How about cui protest?
No. Where else is it going on?
Sure.
That the first thing I thought of, I went, well, heck, if they can do that in California, is it? There one in New York? Is there one in Nashville? Is there one in Atlanta? Maybe they've got one in all 10. I don't know, but I would give out a code inspectors right now. Start looking for water hoses right now.
Start looking for buildings that are supposed to be abandoned, and start figuring out who's.
On the other hand, look at their owner records.
If you can run a math lab in just about all kinds of hidden places, imagine what the Chinese can do with all their money.
That's what I'm saying. Stop letting them buy property.
Meth
All right.
labs for all kinds of other dangerous
Hey,
substances.
here's another quick fast one. We don't have to talk about. Matthew, we're coming to you. Just so everybody knows, Sam Bankman-Fried, who was charged with campaign finance fraud for the Democrats, that charge has been dropped. They've dropped those finance campaign charges of fraud against him. So he'll get charged with other stuff, I'm sure, but he's not gonna be charged with the campaign finance, which I think's pretty odd. But that's just me. Matthew Durham, you have something, and I'm going to read this to you. Warning on hyper reality. What does that mean? Who does that come from? And I'm probably not going to have a lot to say on this because it sounds like something that's above my pay grade.
I think you're going to find this very helpful.
All right, let's go for it.
And hopefully the same can be said for our audience as well. It's been very helpful for a lot of people that I've talked to about it. And suddenly you get that light bulb moment. So yeah, hyper reality. This is an idea that comes to us actually as a warning from this is actually something useful that came to us from one of the postmodern philosophers.
Right.
His name is Jean Baudrillard. And I do not claim to be an expert. This is something that I've sort of gained by listening to other commentators on his work, most directly from a guy by the name of Michael Young, who goes by the Twitter handle Wocal Distance. And the basic notion of hyperreality is that I'll use an example first, and then we'll kind of talk about the principle that he's getting at. So imagine that you've got it's 100 years ago, right? And you got a couple of guys walking down the train tracks or whatever, and they see some strawberries, and they pick up a strawberry and like, hey, that's great, that's awesome. Have a strawberry.
Okay.
Right. And then 20, 30 years later, some company says, I think we can make something that tries to capture the essence of that strawberry, but put it into another form that we can also sell as a product, right?
Okay.
So maybe they make a soda that's trying to capture the strawberry taste, right? The essence of the strawberry. And then a while later, another company comes out and says, I think we can make a candy out of that, right? We're going to use as our base, we're going to take the soda, right? And we're going to extract out the essence of the strawberry from the soda, right? And then you get a Jolly Rancher or something, right? And then a few years later, you get 7-Eleven doing a strawberry slushy, right? We're going to take it from it's going to be from the Jolly Rancher, right? So it's Jolly Rancher slushy.
Right.
Of a strawberry. And so 100 years later, you're walking down the street with, your nephew or whatever, and your nephew has a strawberry Slurpee from 7-Eleven in his hand. And you walk by these railroad tracks and you see a strawberry growing out of the railroad tracks. And your nephew says, hey, that kind of looks like what's on my strawberry Slurpee. And he tries it. It's like, but it's not the same. Maybe it's not as sweet. Right.
Yes.
So what Jean Baudrillard is talking about is this process where you find something that you're interested in or that you like, and you try to extract out the essence of that thing that you really like. And then you do it again. Only each time you're extracting it out from the next stage of extraction.
And not the original source.
Exactly. It's
Right.
making copies of copies of copies of copies on a copy machine.
Yeah.
For those of us that still use copiers. Right. And eventually, or it's playing telephone, maybe, right? You're eventually what you get has maybe some sort of basic similarity, but it's not the same anymore. It's an attempt to get the essence of the thing iteratively, right? Over time, again and again and again and again, copies of copies of copies. So what is a modern example of this that we might actually recognize other than, a strawberry Slurpee? How about womanhood? Let's take let's take 100 years ago. You have women, and maybe you've got things that are attempting to sort of get at the essence of what it is to be a woman. So you might have, say, clothing that accentuates the natural curves of a woman.
Okay.
And then you get makeup. Again, right? You're trying to extract out that essence and sort of blow it up, make it bigger. What about plastic surgery, Botox injections? What about filters on your camera? And the one that I'm seeing as the most modern incarnation, two of them actually. One, the trans woman, right? It's not based on the original. It's based upon all of these iterated extractions of womanhood. That's why they can't tell you what a woman is anymore, because they've done this iterative copy of a copy of a copy extraction process, and they're not actually referring back to the original anymore. Or another good example, AI girlfriends,
Mm.
right? You have AIs that can recreate this ideal woman from all of these collections of pictures on the internet. And they've been working and working and working. It's getting to the point now where you can look at an AI picture of a woman up against a picture of an actual woman, and you will struggle to be able to tell the difference between a photoshopped, filtered picture of a woman and an AI woman.
Mhm.
They're also attempting to model the, of course, dialogue and conversation using AI, predictive modeling and word associations. And it's going to get to the point where what we're going to be focusing in on, especially young men, is going to be this hyper reality of what it is to be in a relationship with a woman. Again, multiple iterated extractions of the supposed ideal, but it's not going to be anything like actually interacting and having a relationship with a real life woman. And to what degree also are actual women taking the hyper reality of what it is to be a woman as the real thing and trying to live up to that ideal instead of being what women have been for, since time immemorial. So that's a basic introduction. Hopefully that is helpful and it makes some sense. So I open it up to responses.
Eric, you want to go? Or do you want me to go?
Just to clarify, so what's the short description of this concept? What's it called again?
Hyper reality.
So when you distill something down, or when you create I'm trying to think of a way to say it in a short version. It's not a new concept, because we've had the idea of, in the 1980s, all the models had to be super skinny, because that's all you saw in the magazine covers, was the famous supermodels that were, just tiny and very, very thin, and that became the reality of what the perfect woman was. If you go back to the 50s, it was Marilyn Monroe, and went back the other way. So was that a hyper distillation? So is part of the hypothesis here that as information and technology increases, we're going to see more instances of this?
It's a process that we use often, is sort of I suppose the end game, and it's going to come with consequences which is to say that we're going to get more and more disconnected from the original every time we try to focus in on what we think the essence of something is, and copy that and blow it up bigger. Right? You take a normal human woman's lips and you add lipstick, right? And then you use AI. You might use filters or clever lighting techniques or plastic surgery, Botox injections, right? Again, blowing it up bigger and bigger and more and more and more, until eventually you've done this so many times that a normal woman's face is utterly unlike the thing that you have created through this copy of a copy of what you think the ideal is.
So if you compare it to men, for example, then Clint goes from being one of the most gorgeous, attractive, and handsome men we've ever seen to just kind of be an average, because he would be fitting in with all the other perfect ideals, and you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Is that what you're saying?
No, you're right that he would become actually
I would now
something.
be Chris Hemsworth, is what I hear him saying.
Yeah, you could go through that process,
But everybody would be
come up
Chris
with that.
Hemsworth.
Well, am I allowed? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, so I've got a couple things I wrote down, and I
Mm.
want to say back to you, Matthew and Eric. You tell me if I'm right on this, on how it could affect political conversation. So here's just random thoughts. First of all, it's we're not having authentic conversations anymore. We're not talking about authentic masculinity, what it is to be a woman. Really, not even talking about what it is authentically to have morals. We are talking about the exaggerated version of both of those, almost like the caricatures. And from the caricature, all we do is pull off. That's why my argument is when you see a lot of people, not all people, so I'm not bashing transgender or people who cross dress, but their idea of a woman is the big hair, the bright makeup, the gigantic boobs, the tight fitting. That's how they present themselves as a woman, because that's the exaggerated version of their mind of what a woman is. So I'm going to show you that I am as much a woman as anybody else by only pulling out the things that I can show. It's not the essence of a woman. It's the things that we as a society say represent woman that we can see visually. The other thing I wrote down, I think your argument is, or your point is well taken to political discourse. For instance, whatever the liberals were 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, and conservatives, what we seem to have done is we distilled down from those on the extreme edges all of the things, like, for instance, and I'll get two examples. On the Republican side, capitalism. We're going to extract capitalism down, and we're going to take it with us, except we forgot to keep it in check. So capitalism, for its sake, is good everywhere, including in corporations. You know what happens? Government capitalism makes you get crony capitalism. And so now we're talking about the exaggerated version of, at one point in time, a good theory where capitalism in its essence works. On the other side, it's the same about inclusivity on the Democrat side. If you only extract the exclusivity and you keep just drawing models on it, where do you draw the line? So you have to include everybody, and it's only for the sake of inclusion, not based on any merit whatsoever. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but then you're having these conversations that are based on the exaggerations, and they're not based on the intent of how it originally started. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's one way this affects us right now. We have these conversations on these exaggerated things that hide under conservatism and liberalism. And in reality, that's how many times I've heard you say it, Matthew, or Bill Maher, or Joe Rogan. The liberal party's left me. Well, it's maybe because they've kept distilling some core values down from the next version and not going back to the original strawberry. Same thing with conservatism. Does that make sense at all, or am I rambling now?
Yeah, I think another good example would be just how the process of conversation itself and debate are represented in our media. If you go back
Oh, great
60
example.
years and you watch how a debate was handled on television, like
Yeah.
on the news or whatever, right? It's a completely different experience than it is watching the debates. I'm putting very big scare quotes around that for our listening audience that we see today.
Yeah.
It's and you could, I think you could look at that as of course it was a process, but it was the media organizations looking at, okay, what about this conversation is the most useful and interesting, and we're gonna really focus in. We're gonna go in on hard on that piece, and then that same process happens every single decade,
Yeah.
over and over and over again, until you get people thinking that the important part about debate is the fight.
The zinger,
Yeah.
the headline. I get the
Yep.
clicks. That's what
The
debate
hot
is.
take.
Yeah, the debate is me calling you a racist and you calling me a fascist, and that is, ooh, I get the 30-second clip on YouTube. That
Right.
is what a debate is. When you go back and watch some of Thomas Sowell's debates, they are fantastic. Oh my God. I mean, they're hour long, they get heated, but they're very civil at the end of the day. So, yeah, to your point, I think this is relevant because it's happening right in front of us. Hyper reality is we're not eating original strawberries and thoughts anymore. We're talking about the exaggerated, bastardized version of them 3 or 4 decades removed.
Yeah.
Let me throw this out here, 'cause let's get a little philosophical for a second. I think part of the reason we're having problems with communicating with each other and having reasonable debates and people being in their own bubbles. I'm wondering, Matthew, where this fits into what you're talking about. That social media has given a voice to the most extremes on each end of the political spectrum. And it makes it seem like that they have a much greater presence than they really have. We've talked about some of the polling and where the American people are, and we figured out that it was like what sometimes conservatives derogatorily refer to as being woke. Uh, the people who are extremely far left believe in critical race theory absolutely and have a lot of those beliefs. That actually only makes up like 6% of the population, and that the far right, Trump or die and just the most extreme uh right wing conservative point of view might only make up 6% of the population. But if you look at social media, that 6% of the population has this huge voice and makes it seem like that it's a majority view, or that it's at least a widespread view. Uh, how does that play into what you're saying?
So those extremes could easily be the essence that is focused on, right? If I'm a media organization and I want to portray who the Democrats are in any given decade, I might look at those extremes as sort of the core representatives of that particular side, or conservatives for that matter. But when I actually talk to people who think of themselves as Democrats or Republicans, uh, all of a sudden you realize, oh, now I'm actually getting back to the strawberry. Now I'm not looking at the repeatedly magnified and extracted version of what it is supposedly to be a Democrat or a Republican. When I had my master's thesis participants, I had liberals and conservatives talking to each other about immigration. There was not a single person who embodied either extreme. There was not a single Democrat or liberal who was in favor of open borders, and there was not a single Republican who was in favor of completely closed borders. Not one. And yet these are supposedly the what represents each side at their core. The fact that not a single one of these people who just largely found me by me reaching out to people on Craigslist, which I think is a reasonably good way of just getting normal people, um, embodied those extremes, right? Those magnified extremes, tells me that yeah, there's something going on with that process. I think it's been happening for a long time. It gets eyeballs, it gets attention when you can zoom in on that one little piece of the picture that you think is the most important, for whatever reason you think it's the most important. Um, and you can really focus only your attention there. But that's not nonfiction.
Do you remember the scene in the classic movie? I think it was the Conan the Barbarian. It's of course one of the cinematic victories in our society. There's a scene in there where Conan is in the middle of the mirrors and he is fighting the beast, and the monster's in all the mirrors. But there's only one mirror that the monster is actually behind, but the monster is a reflection in all of the ones around him. So he starts throwing and hitting the sword through the mirror, thinking that's the monster, and he realizes that's how he's killing the monster. The reason I brought that up is it seems like we're having conversations with a reflection of what something used to be. And so we're getting into these arguments and it's not the real thing anymore. It's I am talking to you about open and closed borders, and in reality, that's why we can't come up with solutions, because we're having conversations not about the original problem or thought. We're having conversations on the headline I just read about you the other day, and we're 30 minutes into this conversation, and you're just now telling me, we're still on the, well, why do you hate people of color coming across the river? Holy Mother of Mary and Barry. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. The issue is we don't have a policy in place that's helping our country. So let's move past that, and we can't do it. And we can't do it because we're stuck in this. Now that you've said it, we've stuck in this hyper reality this conversation that's, we're not talking about strawberries anymore. We're just talking about the slushy. And you're not going to fix a problem with the original strawberry if you're just going to try to fix the slushy. There you go.
Perfect.
By God, you can't make a strawberry. You can't fix the slushy. Can't fix the strawberry by dealing with the Jolly Rancher. That's my philosophical. Now, people, I feel like I should be sitting on the rock and all the students sitting below me. I've got a tunic on. I've got my yoga thing on. I'm just dispensing wisdom now.
Would you like some hemlock?
Wow. I don't know. What the hell? Hey, do y'all got anything else you want to add to that one, or do you just want to spend the next 3 minutes talking? Everybody give our opinion, and then we're going to give our recommendations. Global bullying is here, unless you guys have something else to talk about.
I'm fine with moving on. Yep.
Okay, Eric,
we can touch on it.
We can touch on global bullying, and we can come back and have a longer conversation. But we've been talking about 2 weeks about the climate stuff. Do you want to give your take on this for the next 2 or 3 minutes, sir? Or do you want to push it to another conversation?
I want to give a preview, and I think Matthew and I have talked about this a couple of times, and I think the three of us need to have a longer conversation about some of the various arguments over climate change. I'm going to start with the premise that if climate change were something as serious as some claim it to be, that we would have been building a lot more nuclear power plants a long time ago, and there wouldn't be such opposition to it. I think that's one simple way of looking at it. I also have learned the lesson over the last few years that if we cannot have an open debate about it, then they're trying to hide something, and that the truth is probably the side that gets taken down from social media. And what are we hearing right now from people who are proponents of the climate change agenda? That anybody who doesn't agree 100% with what their hypothesis is, then that is misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, and should be taken down from social media. So it tells me that if we're not going to have an open, clean debate about it, that there are some real issues. I've given examples before of the 40 to 50 prior disasters that were predicted, from global cooling to ice age to acid rain to oil shortages to everything under the sun, almost none of which have come anywhere close to being true. I think the closest that came true was killer bees, because I saw a movie in the 70s about them. The rest of them, though, it's just been this one exaggeration after another. And at the end of the day, I'm very hopeful that mankind will be able to deal with these issues. And what I see coming from the side that believes that we need to do dramatic stuff to lower our standard of living, it just doesn't sound like we're having a good faith conversation. Those are all my preview things. I'd like to dig into it more, but I don't want to start it an hour into our podcast.
No, I get it. Matthew, I'll give it to you. The only thing I'll say is I 100% believe human beings affect our environment and our climate, as all biological creatures do. We take stuff in and we put stuff out. I think we also have a responsibility to do it in an effective manner and respecting the environment we live in, because we want to leave it as good as possible for upcoming generations. I also know there are cities under the sea and seashells and deserts, and continents that are split apart. So I do know that over thousands and thousands of years, the climate is affecting by what? Earth. It has its own life, its own cycle. And so us having a good face conversation somewhere in there where we can go, yes, we're affecting it. How can we adapt? How can we change? What can we fix? And at what point in time, where do we all go? We're the rider on the bull. And even at our best, we're still just riding this thing called climate and environment, which Earth has before us and will have probably after us. Matthew, you give your take on it, and we'll move on. We'll wrap this one up.
Yeah, this is definitely worth a longer conversation, and I have learned a lot from a wide variety of folks on this topic. Right now, as I talked about last week, I'm reading Bjorn Lomborg's book False Alarm, which I think will provide a lot of interesting perspectives and data on this topic when we do have that conversation, perhaps next week, if we're all ready for that. I think the biggest or the easiest mistake to avoid for anybody in this conversation is to not assume that a single data point tells us anything about broader patterns. I've seen it all the time. I remember people on the left in the 2000s highlighting conservatives who would say, well, it's snowing right now, so there's obviously no global warming, right? And they would make fun of conservatives for using that one data point of, oh, it's snowing on this one day, as proof somehow that there was no global warming or climate change or whatever, right? But fast forward 10, 15 years, and I'm seeing precisely the same thing being done by the left. I see people saying, well, it was really hot today. Gosh, that global warming.
Or the month of July was the hottest month we've ever had, or something. Yeah,
right.
Which may be true.
Temperature records have been getting broken all over the place, right? Again, those are individual data points, and if you want to understand broad patterns, you can't look at it using just your preferred noticed data points that are showing up on your side of the media. That's not how good modeling works, good description works when it comes to how weather and climate are functioning or changing over time. That's a much more nuanced discussion, and we can all make our lives easier by not doing that, and thinking a bit more broadly. I wish to say that the left had not started doing that, but now that kind of lazy thinking is just everywhere. So
Well,
yeah.
we'll have that deeper conversation probably next week or soon. But I think we've done a good job of previewing it, guys. We're going to wrap this.
Can I give one more preview for that?
Yeah, go for it.
Matthew, what are the questions we should be asking about climate change? People pushing the agenda and changing the rules.
Cui bono.
Cui bono and cui prodest.
Hey, everybody got a recommendation before I say goodbye?
Yeah.
I do.
Go for it, Matthew.
I
You
got a
go first.
couple.
No, I want Matthew to
you
go first. Yeah, I get to tell who goes first. Matthew, you go first.
I recently had some lefty friends suggest that movies pushing politics was not new, because I was talking very pleasantly about 80s action movies. And one of the examples that they gave was RoboCop as being a very explicitly political film. So I decided to recently rewatch RoboCop. And it truly is. It has political arguments being made in it implicitly. I really do recommend that you rewatch it if you haven't seen it. It is simultaneously criticizing the defund the police approach, and it is criticizing the merger of government and government and corporate power, which is to say the original definition of fascism. So unlike our modern Antifa movement, RoboCop is actually an anti-fascist film. And I really do recommend it. It does a good job. You don't turn over functions of law enforcement to corporations. That's a bad idea. So yeah, RoboCop.
All right.
Watch it again.
Eric, you want to go before I give mine? We'll wrap this one up.
Yeah, I've got two, one serious, one for fun. I'll do my for fun one first. I've been watching The Silo on Apple TV. Season 1 is out. The basic premise is that this whole community of people are living in an underground silo. Kind of, looking at it from our perspective, you can tell it was built because preparation for some kind of nuclear disaster or some kind of apocalypse. But what's happened is, over time, the powers that be have ensured that people don't know what's outside, don't know how they got there, don't know why they're there, and any artifacts or relics that might give a clue to that kind of stuff have been banned. And there's kind of like a secret police whose idea is to round up anybody who has ideas. They're also not allowed to basically invent new technology. They can only use what they have. It's a great sort of post-apocalyptic kind of show, and the drama is pretty good, and the characters, I think, are fantastic, especially the main character that starts with episode 2. She's just absolutely fantastic. The one that's more serious, I also started watching. I watched one episode of, also on Apple TV. It's called The Big Con, and it's spelled CONN. And it's the story of how Eric Kahn, the Social Security attorney, worked with corrupt federal judges and corrupt members of the Social Security Administration to rip off the government for basically about $500 million in Social Security benefits. As somebody who's handled about 1,250 Social Security hearings and I was board certified as a Social Security attorney for a long time before I mostly started doing disability insurance, I'm very familiar with the system. There are some very deserving people who qualify under the rules to get their disability benefits, and there's some people who are iffy, and you got to fight to get it one way or the other. This guy had a very corrupt system in place, but there were people inside the government that were also working with him that were very, very corrupt. And if you want to learn about how a bureaucracy can become corrupted and have basically a mindset of protecting its own, which allows the corruption to continue, this is a great show to learn about that. It's called The Big Con on Apple TV, set in Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia.
All right, my recommendation is a movie with Stacy Keach. It's old. I've recommended it on podcast 1,000 times. It's called The Ninth Configuration. I challenge anybody to ever go. If you've never watched it, it's about religion, but it's also got some very dark humor and some really poignant moments that make you think. It's an older movie. The Ninth Configuration. I've watched it probably a dozen times in my life, and it is again. It's not going to be one you laugh all the way through, but there'll be moments that the humor is there. If you will, it's a mental asylum and it's wartime. That's all I'll tell you. It's a great movie, and I just want to say this to both of you, and it's Latin, vale. There you go. Y'all can go look it up. VALE, vale. Does either one of y'all know what it means?
Clearly, the person who parks your car for you at a,
No,
a
vale.
fancy restaurant.
Does it? No. Does anybody know what it means?
That means come. That
means goodbye.
Oh.
And on that note,
what does Veni come? I'm trying to remember.
Veni Vici.
Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw,
Yeah.
I conquered, and Vale as I went. That's what it is. Veni Vidi Vici Vale.
VENIRE.
That's the infinitive.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you go. See, I was trying to end up smart, and y'all went down. You know what? God dang it! I'm going to end it the way right in the middle. Y'all can kiss my ass. All right,
you're so pretty, ladies. You need to be watching the video of
valet.
This.
I'm going to say it like I do at Waffle House. Valet.
You need to be watching the video of this. If you're just listening to Clint, as sexy as his voice is, it's nothing to compare to how good looking he is.
I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, everybody.
See you next week.